Welcome back to the Solid Verbal, boys and girls. My name is Ty Hildenbrandt. That fine gentleman over there is the one, the only, always the incomparable Dan Rubenstein. And, yeah. We have breaking news!
Boop, 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 boop. Yep.
We hit the record button this evening with enormous breaking news. Maybe the cake topper on a season that was already chock full of breaking news. Around 5 p.m. Eastern time on Wednesday evening, ESPN's Chris Lowe reported that Nick Saban had informed his Alabama team that he was retiring. I say officially because I don't know if you saw that Message Board Geniuses, our friend, the great Twitter account, posted a screen grab from earlier in the day on an Auburn message board that there were rumors.
I'm telling you, there are, not to talk too much about Message Board Geniuses, but they've got some stuff there, man.
They got some stuff, man. Somebody on
stealing paywall content.
Somebody on the Auburn Live board had some stuff, and there were rumors earlier in the day of a 4 p.m. team meeting and possible retirement stuff. Needless to say, this is the kind of thing that creates a total shockwave in our college football world. We have joked for years, Dan, years on end, before we take any kind of extended break or vacation or just step away from the microphone a few days.
Right.
We have joked for the last 5 years. Should we record like just a tag here that we could put out on the feed in the event that Nick Saban retires while we're gone? Well, we come on the airwaves today because, Dan, at the ripe old age of 72, Nick Saban, perhaps the greatest coach in the history of the sport, has indeed decided to retire.
Yeah, I mean, it depends where you want to start with this. Obviously, a lot of the conversation right now is on the Alabama successor at head coach, and rightfully so. Obviously, this is a program that has not had uncertainty at coach in quite some time. 2006 was the last time somebody else that not named Nick Saban coached the team. He's the greatest ever. That is not really worth debating. I don't think anybody actually does debate it anymore. That's not a take. That's not anything near that. And for the sake of Nick Saban, hopefully it's not a health thing for him. Hopefully it's not a health thing for anybody in his family. Hopefully, the likeliest case is just it was time. It was, a matter of waking up and not feeling the juice and feeling like he was ready for the next stage in his life. And, a lot of people have been pointing to game day, perhaps Nick Saban being a Lee Corso successor and a much less rigorous lifestyle of merely talking about the sport can confirm it's a much less rigorous lifestyle talking about the sport than actually coaching it, I suppose. I have never coached a major Power 5 program. So that's the assumption, and hopefully, for the case of everybody involved, that's the reality. And certainly with this new era of the sport, and I'm not going to attribute his retirement to it, but it presents a number of challenges that just didn't exist in 2007 when he took this job, let alone the Michigan State job, let alone the LSU job way back when. But yes, between NIL, the transfer portal, realignment, and just the ever-changing structure of the sport, it's for some people, it's not for some people. And so come mid-January 2024, Nick Saban felt now is the time. And
now is the time.
Here we are.
Indeed. Yeah, Nick Saban let Miss Terry be the, official newsbreaker on this matter around 7:30 p.m. Eastern time on his Nick's Kids Facebook page. She made a thoughtful and heartfelt post. News followed from the Alabama official Twitter account shortly thereafter with a tweet that simply read, "Thank you, Coach." Make sure you hit subscribe or follow. We're going to be talking a lot about this in the off season. Verballers.com is where you can go for bonus content, the ad-free episodes, and whatnot. But look, it goes without saying here. I said it at the top, Saban, the best coach of all time in college football. 7 national championships, 6 of which came at Alabama. By nearly every measure, the greatest the sport has ever had. You can make a case now that this is the best job in college football. Certainly the roster is about the most talented in college football. At least for now, we can get into that part as well. The other thing that this ensures, because as you said, much of the conversation has shifted to who is the successor going to be, this means that we are not just going to have one coaching search. There are going to be multiple coaching searches. I say that because Alabama is not going after an up-and-coming offensive coordinator. Alabama is going after a top 10 coach, somebody who's already paid a lot of money, somebody who knows how to recruit, use the NIL infrastructure to their advantage.
Right.
So by all accounts, some of the names that we've seen, we can go through those here momentarily. If any of these guys decide that they want to coach Bama instead, there is going to be another very high-profile coaching search that commences almost immediately.
Yeah, I agree. And unless it's Brian Dable, right? Unless there's like an NFL component, which that would be, is he not the active coach of the New York Giants?
For now, yes.
For now,
sure.
And he had his 1 year, a really strong year as an offensive coordinator at Alabama. But yes, short of that happening, there is likely going to be a major college football coaching search that is going to be a result. The dominoes, this is the sort of second wave of the coaching carousel. Certainly Jim Harbaugh's name has come up with leaving a major institution, now a national championship institution. And so if that were to come to pass, we'd have two active ones that would result in perhaps some dominoes, though Michigan has, it seems, much more of a successor situation than Alabama does at the moment. It was never going to be Kevin Steele, but he just retired a few days ago, and here is where we are as a program. So yes, you're absolutely right that there could be a situation at Oregon, there could be a situation at Washington, there could be a situation at Texas, there could be a situation at Florida State in which, a coach leaves. And these are some of the names. There could be a situation at Ole Miss. Obviously, there are a number of coaches with connections to Saban, to Alabama, to the SEC, or have risen up the coaching ranks to the point where they are being considered seriously for this job. Greg Byrne, the AD at Alabama, tweeted out, congratulations to Nick Saban, the greatest ever, blah, blah, blah. And also, if you hear it from anybody else, it's not true. The next thing I tweet will be the name of the new head coach at Alabama. Seen that Alabama's going to move quickly. We've seen a major decommitment, I believe a 5-star receiver from Alabama, which certainly doesn't mean anything yet until Alabama has named a new coach. There is a later signing period. I think Alabama players have 30 days now to enter the portal, under the rules that if a coach leaves, then you have different sort of portal privileges. So either way, if Alabama knocks this out of the park and hires whoever it is that you think that they're going to knock out of the park, there's still going to be a bunch of dudes leaving this Alabama roster because Alabama's not hiring Nick Saban. And so in large part, those dudes went to Alabama for Nick Saban. So
that's right.
There's going to be a lot more activity in the portal. There's going to be a lot more activity in the coaching world. And here we are in our sort of second wave.
I do want to get into, of course, the names. That's why a lot of people are tuning in.
Yep.
I obviously want to talk about ripple effects. You talk about the roster and the recruiting and what all happens next. We can get into that as well. But look, we would be doing Nick Saban an injustice if we did not talk at least a little bit about the legacy that now he leaves as he walks out the door. This is a guy who began his career way back when at Kent State, had a brief cup of coffee as the head coach at Toledo, was at Michigan State for a bunch of seasons, LSU, won a championship at LSU. And of course, his most recent run at Alabama, 6 national championships between 2007 and 2023. It got to the point with Saban, frankly, where, and a lot of people were cheering on the fact that Saban was retiring because there were many times you and I would come on the air and we would talk about Alabama. And I feel like the zombie Alabama bit came from Nick Saban. It just came from this feeling in the pit of your stomach that you always had playing against Alabama, that he was just going to figure it out. Yeah. Even in that playoff game. I mean, the reason that I went with Alabama, I think above all else, even though I really liked Michigan, was the fact that, Nick Saban had a month to prepare. Yeah. And you don't want to give Nick Saban a month to prepare for anybody. All too often, he's going to win that game. There was this sense of inevitability around the Nick Saban-led Alabama squad that was really, really difficult for non-Alabama fans to deal with. And now that he's obviously this creates a pretty big vacuum, a power vacuum in the sport. Somebody's going to come in and fill it, and they're going to have all of the tools that Alabama has to offer at their disposal. But it's just I feel like we're going to read about Nick Saban 10 years from now. And unless you were there, unless you were living it, unless you were rooting for college football in the moment, it's sort of hard to quantify just that sense of inevitability that was always persistent with this program.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely true. It's unique. Has been a cyborg in this sport in a way that nobody else has been, because he keeps surviving, and you can't believe that he's human. You can't believe that it's another year in which he's reeling in an all-time recruiting class, another year in which he's winning 11, 12 regular season games, another year in which it looks like they're dead 6 games in and they win the national championship. And so nobody's done it quite like him. And nobody will, especially with how consolidated and stacked schedules will be, at least in the short term in these major conferences in the SEC and the Big Ten. It's going to be unmatched. We'll see with Kirby Smart, but Kirby Smart's job just became a lot more difficult in some ways. He has to win more games to win a national championship. He now has to face, some combination of Texas and Oklahoma and whoever else the SEC adds these next few years, if we're to believe that college football is headed in that direction. And I think it's also important to note, Nick Saban has not been super pleased with the direction of the sport these past few years, whether it's about NIL and the back and forth with Jimbo, whether it's about, the scheduling for Alabama feeling like they got the raw end of the stick with regards to what future SEC scheduling is and their annual opponents. He's been pretty vocal about things about the SEC, things about the sport in general, things about where the sport is heading that he has not been a fan of. That doesn't mean he was going to retire, but you could kind of sense a little bit of displeasure. Is that a word, displeasure? I hope it is.
Sure.
When Nick Saban spoke at length. And so it's not a surprise. The man's in his 70s, yes?
Yeah.
It's
72.
not a surprise, but yeah. Where do you want to go from here? Do you want to talk about where Alabama goes from here? Is there anything else with Nick Saban, anything else to think about with this retirement, what it means in the short term for the sport?
Well, look, in the short term for the sport, we're already embroiled in this conversation about the transfer portal. We're already embroiled in this conversation about NIL and how it is changing the landscape. We have talked about other coaches who we've joked about other coaches who we've said are just kind of getting too old for this. Whether they are actually too old for it or just feel that way because the sport has changed so much. And this is, as I said earlier, probably the most talented roster in the game. Shortly after this news broke, Ryan Williams, the number 3 overall receiver in the 2024 class, the number 10 overall player, a 5-star, announced that he was decommitting from Alabama. I think on top of the fact that they already have this roster, which now has an additional 30 days to transfer out if they want to, they also have to try and defend their turf, their 2024 class, which was obviously, right up there at the very, very
enormous
top as well. So this is going to be a 2-front battle. The sooner they can put somebody in place to try and, quell that, the better. But my sense is that they're going to take on some water here. And that redistribution of talent is certainly going to have an impact for whoever's able to reel it in. No,
you're absolutely right. And there is that sort of idea of, the HBO show 100-Foot Wave? Are you familiar with it?
I am
familiar. A big wave surfer from, I believe, Hawaii goes to Portugal because he learns of these mythical waves. This is sort of somebody being handed the surfboard after him. We're just like, good luck. If you can ride it, you're going to be an absolute legend. You'll be considered the greatest ever if you can ride this wave. This is a difficult job. This is an impossible spot for whoever ends up taking this job. And on one hand, good luck, he says sarcastically. On the other hand, why coach in this sport at a major level if you don't believe in yourself, if you don't have the confidence to say you can build the best possible team in the sport, if you don't have the confidence to say that I know this is a huge challenge, but I'm up for it. I know it's an impossible job, but at the same time, I sort of applaud somebody who is, yes, willing to take $10 million a year or whatever and have a contract bought out. But man, Nick Saban's special ability was to just keep this as a machine that was, perfectly sleek and aligned all this time with the number of voices in any major college football program, let alone one that defines old money in this sport, let alone one that defines the show in town, the show in the state, the show in the region almost. It's a crazy tall task, and somebody's going to be handed the keys to a Maserati with no instruction manual, with no idea of what buttons to push to switch gear. It's an impossible task, but somebody's going to be paid handsomely to take it. We wish Nick Saban well. That, of course, then opens up the floodgates on college football Twitter's favorite topic,
coaching rumors.
It's always next. Who's next? Next recruit, next coach, everything. Yep.
It's always next. So some of the names that came up from our friend Bruce Feldman, who we had on recently, maybe we'll have to bring him on again some point soon to talk through the latest. But of course, Dan Lanning, who has an enormous $20 million buyout, Steve Sarkisian, Kalen DeBoer, Mike Norvell, Dabo Swinney. I don't know if there are any surprises in there. Frankly, I'd be surprised if they went with Dabo Swinney at this point in time, but I understand, given his connections, why he would be on that list. Some other names from Pete Thamel, James Franklin, and Marcus Freeman. I have to be honest, I laughed at both, but that's just me. Mike Norvell.
Marcus Freeman, you can at least understand on a certain level.
I can't.
Well, you can if you're thinking, we got to get a deal, right? We got to get somebody who's able to weather this and take 3 years worth of a crazy amount of cash.
Listen,
it's not going to be Marcus Freeman.
It's not going to be Marcus Freeman, nor should it be with some of these other names that are out there.
Yeah.
Mike Norvell is an interesting name. I am, of course, not privy to anything, but Mike Norvell, around a $4 million buyout as compared to some of the other ones that, I see Pete Thamel has listed here. That's not too tall of a bill to go out and get a coach who has proven that he can build programs.
I don't think the buyout's going to matter. If Dan Lanning is the guy and he has a $20 million buyout, Alabama will find the money. I think the number matters when you get into like Florida State trying to buy out of the ACC, that kind of number, then it starts to matter. And even then, maybe it doesn't. Dan Lanning is probably, at this point, his name has come up the most. Mike Norvell's name makes sense. Kalen DeBoer, of course, if you look at Kalen DeBoer and what he was able to do almost immediately at Washington, taking this team undefeated into the national championship game with a non-elite roster. Imagine what he could do if he is able to surround himself with a killer recruiting staff at Alabama and compete and bring in top 5 classes. What could he do then with the type of roster? Obviously, that's like the tantalizing hypothetical and what if. Dan Lanning, of course, his name is there because he spent time in Tuscaloosa, has coached in the SEC, coached at Georgia, coached under Kirby Smart, has recruited at Oregon. Not the easiest place geographically to recruit to at an enormously high level, is young. It could be seen as like he's the next thing in the sport, even though has not won a conference, is I think 1-4 against Oregon's rivals at this moment and 20-1 otherwise. And so he's, with the one loss being Georgia, he's an obvious name. He's an obvious name because of his youth, because of his energy, because of his experience there, his know-how within the SEC. He has also been very vocal about he wants Oregon to be his last job. That's what he said in the lead up, I believe, to the Fiesta Bowl. He doesn't want to move his kids again. He's made a point of saying that a number of times to Oregon media. And so, saying things like the grass isn't always greener. He has been probably more outspoken than he's needed to be, whether it's about, take your pick, Auburn, Texas A&M, whatever. He has been very outspoken about Eugene, Oregon being the place for him. Does that matter in this sport? Not especially. Does that matter if you're an Oregon fan and hearing what Mario Cristobal and Willie Taggart and Chip Kelly, all these, not really. And so Alabama's a special beast. He didn't play at Alabama. He didn't attend the University of Alabama. He went to a small school in Missouri. So it's not like the, Michigan and Harbaugh coming home or Mario going home to Miami. It's a different animal. It's an enormous job. It's a job that looks like it's setting somebody up for failure. You don't want to be the guy after the guy, but the guy after that. But the case for Dan Lanning, if you're Alabama or an Alabama fan, it's not terribly difficult to make.
No. How do you feel about the Dan Lanning rumors, right? Oregon, for better or worse, is always tangled up in these. I just said how I felt about it. Well, I know, but tangled up in these rumors.
Yeah. How do I feel as like an Oregon fan or as a solid verbal co-host?
No, as an Oregon fan, because we do have a lot of Oregon people that listen, and for as I think redeeming as it is to know that your coach is in demand and to know that your athletic department does a good job hiring people that will be in demand at some point down the line, it's also a bit frustrating to constantly have this conversation.
Sure, certainly. It's super disheartening because I think the Oregon fan base, myself included, have felt really good about the direction of this program in a way that it wasn't similar to Mario Cristobal or Willie Taggart. I think there's more of a force of personality with Dan Lanning that has endeared himself to the Oregon fans in ways that, Mark Helfrich was relatively quiet, sort of a very like kind, genteel type coach. And Willie Taggart had a big personality, but he was gone in a year. Nobody really got to know him. And people loved Chip Kelly, but they understood that level of success and where he was from in the Northeast and taking eventually the Eagles job, that there was going to be a certain pull with the NFL with Chip Kelly because of where he was from. The number of times, or it seems that Oregon's doing this every couple of years. It's perhaps a little bit less frequent than that, but it's super deflating. It's super deflating to like have this sense of like, here we go again. Here was what's Rob Mullins going to do. And look, they kind of keep improving. Like Willie Taggart was better than late stage Mark Helfrich, and Mario Cristobal was better than Willie Taggart. And Dan Lanning was better than Mario Cristobal, I think. Or at least showed the ability or showed a much higher ceiling, I think, than Mario Cristobal, and was certainly put much more fun teams on the field. And so Oregon's done a really nice job of making itself a destination should Dan Lanning move on to Alabama. I don't know who they hire. I can go out and get like Jed Fish or something, but it is deflating. It makes the sport less fun, he says, as he roots for a team that's fully funded by like a billionaire shoe company that has every advantage that smaller programs don't. But no,
right. Little old Oregon.
Little old Oregon. No, it still makes it deflating in a weird place where you're a major national program, but you can't maintain, sort of continuity at the top. I don't know what people are going to know by the time they listen to this, if they're not listening or watching it live, but my sense is how emphatic Dan Lanning has been very recently about like, no, this is the place for me. This is the place for me. He's doing so in a much more dramatic way than a lot of coaches do it. And the romantic, I called it precious side of me, knowing what college football is and the realities of the sport, I believe him. And it's maybe silly and maybe it's dumb and foolish, but he's been much more emphatic. And Alabama's Alabama, but I don't know. I'm using his own words as a guide at this point.
Well, it'll be interesting to see. He seems to be unanimously the top target.
Yeah.
As soon as some of this news came out, it was a Dan Lanning conversation.
Yeah.
I would not be surprised if there is more Sark conversation.
Yeah, you've got Sark. You've got, I think I saw Colin Cowherd said Kalen DeBoer, and I guess he's, Cowherd's from the Northwest. He's connected to a lot of West Coast schools, knows a lot of people. That Greg Byrne, the AD at Alabama, has had a crush on Kalen DeBoer for some time. I think Kalen DeBoer has a daughter who is either attending or going to soon attend the University of Washington. None of these things matter, right?
No,
everything is changeable, erasable, fixable, transferable. It's how do you feel? How do you feel about these guys and who would be a fit and who is built to take on the 100-foot wave that is Tuscaloosa, Alabama?
Well, look, for as much as I like Dan Lanning, and for as much as I think he has proven himself a very, very astute recruiter and wielder of all things NIL, Dan Lanning has a lot to prove as a college football coach. There was a notable moment earlier in this season where he went for it. Maybe he shouldn't have.
Right.
There were 2 games this year that we've had people send us messages that he was outcoached in key moments.
Sure.
Whether or not you believe that, whether or not you believe that devalues him at all, that's on you. But I don't know if that's worth a $20 million buyout. Sark's been there before. It's been a long road for Sark. You could certainly make the same case for Sark. What's Sark want, right? But Sark did go to the playoff.
He won the Big 12. He won the
Big 12.
He was
right. So
a better throw away from going to the national championship game. Yep.
So maybe he's got a little bit more body of work to stand on. And you mentioned Kalen DeBoer. I think it's obvious why he might be a target for this as well. What I really don't want to see them do.
Who's built different, Ty, though?
Who's built differently?
Yeah. Who's built in a way that they want to take on the 100-foot wave, and you could see based on what they've done or what they've shown or what their ceiling is, like, this makes a lot of sense.
Of these names, if I were picking as an Alabama fan, I'd want to go with Sark.
Okay.
I would want to take Sark because I think it's been a slower but methodical build at Texas. He has instilled toughness in a way that Texas did not previously have under the previous regimes. I like the way he has built that program. What I don't want to see them do is hire Dabo. From a content standpoint, hiring Dabo would be gold for us. But as an Alabama fan, I get the connective tissue. I totally understand why he could be a fit there. But much like it was with Jimbo Fisher going to Texas A&M, hiring Dabo at this point, frankly, is a guy you're getting on the way down because he doesn't want anything to do with the transfer portal. His stance on NIL has always been weird. And dog, the game is changing. The game is changing in a big way. I don't think you want to hitch your wagon to that philosophy at this point in time. That's just me. So if I'm looking at this list, I'm taking Sark, I'm taking Kalen DeBoer, I'm taking Dan Lanning, Mike Norvell for me is a conversation.
Yeah.
I don't know about any of the other names that have surfaced.
Yeah, I know Norvell has disappointed Florida State fans on the trail as a recruiter, that he's not on the level of where Jimbo was or where Florida State sees itself, finishing with top 5-ish classes annually and really owning that state. And of course, every Florida fan feels like Billy Napier should be doing this and Mario Cristobal should be doing this, per every Miami fan. That's the nature of the beast in the Sunshine State. I think it would be a great hire if the recruiting gets either a boost via a staff, via a machine at Alabama that doesn't exist at Florida State behind the scenes in a recruiting department. I think there's a lot of guys who make sense. If you're Sark, major SEC program in Austin, major SEC program in Tuscaloosa, you might as well just stay in Austin. Texas is a major national program.
Yeah,
it's a playoff program. It doesn't make sense moving forward in the SEC that you would jump ship to go to Alabama. So I don't think that's why his name has come up as much. Ole Miss, certainly not the program Alabama is. Lane Kiffin has dallied in conversations before. Obviously last year there was, a lot of Auburn steam, and he made the announcement to his team, I think before the Egg Bowl, that he was going to stick around, but he certainly had conversations, or representatives for Lane Kiffin had conversations with Auburn. So why wouldn't you with Alabama, unless he was there and knows the ins and outs of the place and has decided not the place for me. So makes sense. Certainly with the success he's had. Yeah.
Right out of my mouth.
Yeah.
The name that is not on some of these lists that I think we all assume is there anyway is Lane Kiffin.
Right.
Right. If we're going to talk about Sark, we got to talk about Kiffin. These are guys who've been around that program, been around Saban.
Yep.
To whatever extent we've had this conversation about who might be the successor, we've always mentioned Sark and Kiffin. So we'll see what Greg Byrne has to say whenever he fires off whenever they shoot off the white smoke and decide that they're going to tweet again. We'll see to what end any of these guys were considered. My hunch is that there'd be a lot of reporting before we get to
I
that point.
wonder the whiff potential. I wonder if this job is used as a sort of stalking horse for a bunch of Jimmy Sexton dudes or Trace Armstrong dudes, whoever, to get raises. And not that, Alabama's almost too good, right? In some of these cases, we're just like, I want to make a bunch of money for a long time, not a little bit of money in a buyout for a short time. And there's a certain amount of security that comes with just not being the Alabama coach. Like, is it going to fall all the way to Lance Leipold, Jed Fish, somebody like that? That's interesting to me. I don't think Alabama's going to settle. I think they're going to keep upping the dollar amounts and they'll get somebody. But it's at least a tong on the fork. Is that tong? Is that no? Or what is it? A tine? I think it's a tine.
A prong.
A prong. A tine on a fork. That's at least a universe. But I think Alabama's. They're going to get a whale. They're going to get somebody. They're going to pay double-digit millions of dollars to get that person. Supposedly, it's happening. We're recording this Wednesday at around 9:30 Eastern as we speak.
Yeah.
Look, if while we're recording the show, it's reported that Dan Lanning's going to Oregon, I will open and drink a beer as we record, and you will get the full unfiltered version.
Yeah.
But it won't be how I felt about Mario Cristobal leaving. I won't be making a video with all of the fourth down stops that teams were able to mount against Oregon, running straight up the middle. There will be it will mostly just be disappointment, not laughter. So yeah, there's a number of names. There are a number of names. This is a huge job. I think there are a number of guys who are going to be up for the challenge, and the number of guys who are going to say they're up for the challenge to get paid by their current place.
Yeah,
Whether that's James Franklin.
James Franklin being on this list.
It's great.
Is the work of Jimmy Sexton. That Jimmy Sexton deserves a bronze statue in a bank somewhere.
By the way,
James Franklin does not belong on this list, but that's just me speaking as a bit of a frustrated Penn State alum.
Tommy Rees, available to anybody who needs an offensive coordinator in this moment, right?
Yeah.
So there's that. I think he still has a pretty good reputation as an offensive mind. Has hit some weird quarterback situations, but has a good reputation. Alabama fans might not think so after that last play call, which probably could have been executed better. But man, I always think about with this opening, I was like, is there a perfect time for Nick Saban to leave, right? Is it after winning a national championship? How long? I'm fascinated to hear him talk. He's going to give an interview to Chris Lowe or whoever. How long has this been on his mind? Did he want to win a national championship and go out like that? And then it just reached the point where he stopped wanting to wake up and coach Alabama football. Like, was there going to be a succession plan? Is it better in January where coaches and players have time to move around? Is it better in June so you sort of lock in the roster for the next guy? Like, was it Bob Stoops did that when he passed it along to Lincoln Riley? I was on my honeymoon, so I want to say it was around June when that news broke. There's never a good time because of this calendar. But another name, I have not seen Lincoln Riley's name come up. I guess he coached his way out of these conversations because he used to be, right? He was rumored for the LSU job way back when.
Right.
Fascinating to hear Nick Saban's timeline and his emotions and his thought process through this whole thing. You have more access to our company bank account than I do. I don't think we can afford Nick Saban as a new third co-host on this show, but if he goes to game day, we can definitely have him on. That'd be great.
It would. So look, more to come on this story, Dan Rubenstein. Yeah. We are just getting started. The news broke again earlier, about 5 p.m. Eastern time, about Nick Saban walking away from being the head coach at Alabama. There will be a lot more to come, but my hunch is because it is so late in the game, Alabama is going to want to move rather quickly.
Of course.
So we will do our best here in our on-demand audio format to stay on top of it as best we can. This was supposed to be an off day. You and I were just talking about, it's good to stretch our legs and not have to talk about college football. Then you called me and said, Ty, you got to check your phone.
I texted you, I slacked you, and then I called you. I was like, what is going on with Ty? I think you were researching pizza oven stuff and watching videos because I've convinced you to start making pizza as a professional hobby. From the people I've texted or the people that I've texted who have texted, like, there's a lot of nothing out there, right? There's a lot of like the news breakers, like, I've kind of heard this, but I don't know. Like, as we record this show, there are other internet shows who are saying there's a rumor that Dan Lanning is already in Tuscaloosa. But from a lot of the reputable people, which doesn't necessarily mean anything, I think the knowledge of this happening is like of this morning. Like, it has not been a long time coming in terms of rumors of this Saban retirement and rumors of like, this guy's immediately going to step in. So I think everybody's sort of furiously texting and calling a few hours after the announcement.
We are doing this show live on YouTube. For those of you who are watching, we will hang around a bit longer. Dan, if you're cool with it, we'll take some comments from the Peanut Gallery and we'll talk through. But in the meantime, since a lot of this is going to end up in the audio format, we'll chop this part out and we'll include the outro as part of what goes out on the feed. So make sure you hit subscribe and follow so that you don't miss any audio content. And if you want to participate in the chat and send in a question or a comment, subscribe to the YouTube channel.
Yeah.
Dan, a lot more to come on this story. We will do our very best to stay on top of it, but we had a break away from our abbreviated vacation and talk about the biggest story on top of all the other big stories in the world of college football. The news that Nick Saban walking away after 17 fruitful seasons at Alabama. We'll see what comes next. More to come for that guy over there. My good friend Dan Rubenstein, for myself, Ty Hildenbrandt, as always, you know the drill. Stay solid.
Peace.
So we've got a bunch of comments that have been coming in, Dan.
Yeah.
And I did want to bring this one up from Antonio, who says, what do you guys think about the transfer portal? You think Alabama players are going to be jumping in it? I think that goes without saying, Dan.
Yes.
I think if we've come to learn anything about the new portal era, guys are sort of just looking for a reason to jump in. It feels that way more often than not.
Well, the reason is do-re-mi, Ty. It's
the reason's
money.
do-re-mi, but it feels like there is, it doesn't take much. A stiff gust of wind will cause somebody to go in the portal. And so, look, this is the most talented roster in college football. It's an incredibly talented roster. This is why they got to move quick to try and bring somebody new in. But if history is any indication, we just saw it at A&M, much different situation at A&M, but also very talented roster. And a lot of those guys went in the portal and went elsewhere. So I don't think there's any reason to think that we won't see the exact same thing go down at Alabama.
Well, yeah, I think that's true. And from the line of thinking for whoever, Dan Lanning, Steve Sarkisian, Mike Norvell, you take your pick, is the appeal, I can go now take the Alabama job and sort of build a roster back up that might have a lot of people leave, or I can just go get 2 or 3 Alabama starters for the roster I've already built and know and coaching, right? If you're any of those guys, you're like, or I could just add Caleb Downs to my secondary, right?
Yeah,
like
exactly.
There's that element to it as well, that like it's a much easier job to just go after the Alabama roster in this moment. They just had however many guys leave on that single day. It was like 9 dudes on that single day, Earl Little and Eli Holstein, all those guys. So because roster construction and management is so much more difficult, it seems, right now because of the portal, because of NIL, if you do have a roster that you already like, plus Alabama players, maybe some Michigan players, who knows, are entering the portal, maybe it's just easier to add than it is to piece out. That could be a line of thinking as well.
Brian chimes in here. He says, late to the stream. We'll forgive you, Brian. It's all right.
Yeah.
My thoughts are that Bama will not want Kiffin. Brian Kelly and other coaches would be foolish to not have bags of money and helicopters on the way to Alabama right now. Brian Kelly's an interesting name. Brian Kelly's a really interesting name. I'm sure Brian Kelly's agents will be using this in some way to leverage his situation at LSU, but I find it hard to believe that Brian Kelly's the guy.
I don't know if that's the insinuation here. It says bags of money and helicopters on the way to Alabama, like to give to Alabama players. I
think to get Alabama players. I'm just speaking from the standpoint of a Notre Dame fan who's still a little bit bitter about the Brian Kelly thing. But I bring that up because I've seen other people mention Brian Kelly. Brian Kelly maybe should be. I watched some other folks who were doing streams, and Brian Kelly was a popular name in the chat. So yes, if you're Brian Kelly, frankly, if you're anybody with NIL money to spend or otherwise money to spend, you're sending it to Tuscaloosa and seeing what you can fish and get. But I would not be surprised if Brian Kelly's name comes up for this job as well.
I'd be surprised.
I don't know. Yeah, I would too, but I don't.
Wait, so are you surprised or not surprised? I'm confused. You would be surprised if his name comes up, or you would not be surprised?
I'm not surprised that his name has come up. I would be surprised if he's under any serious consideration.
Oh, I haven't seen his name. Okay, continue.
All right. So what else do we got here? I'm going to go back to this one because I saw it from about 10 minutes ago. Nathan says, when's PJ Fleck get his big job, or is Minnesota his ceiling? So PJ Fleck is not going to get the Alabama job. We know this.
Yeah.
But I am always interested when we do these streams about some of the situations that our astute footballers bring up. I think right now he's probably stuck.
That's not nice.
Yeah, I think he's stuck. Is there a big name job out there that's going to steal PJ Fleck away from Minnesota?
No. No, there isn't. And because of the offense and some partially the defense, but mostly the offense falling off a cliff. Certainly Minnesota has, a pretty big need at quarterback. I just, it's not going to be PJ Fleck anywhere big.
No. Here we go. Was waiting for this one. I was waiting. Thank you. Thank you, Jay Rockstar. Pete Carroll. Yeah, Pete Carroll. I don't know if he was fired or resigned from the Seahawks. Whatever that situation,
I
it's not
think
going to be the
he's
coach.
like going to take some sort of emeritus job, advisor with the Seahawks. Yeah.
Yeah. Here we go. Let's talk about Freeman. Steve wants to know, is Freeman that crazy considering his buyout is likely to be a fraction of any of the biggest names? So ND private school, don't really know the buyout, believed to be $4 million-ish dollars. I think it's crazy. If you were following a legend, the likes of Nick Saban, the likes of which the sport has literally never seen, I think you want somebody with more of a proven track record for winning big games, for winning stuff. Freeman has proven that he can recruit at a really high level, a level that Notre Dame has not gotten to. He is doing that. He is using the system. He is getting transfers. I commend him on the job he is doing, but I'll be honest, I am very disappointed by the season we saw this past year. I'm extremely disappointed because it was all there.
Mm-hmm.
The schedule was there, right? It ended up being easier, I think, in reality than we thought on paper when we did our previews back in August. He had more than enough talent on this team to do better than 9-3 regular season. And so, I don't know, to follow up Saban with that, could end up being a good coach. I feel like he is learning on the job and improving, but not for this.
I just don't think Alabama is shopping at the discount aisle. Right? I don't think they're looking for like, oh, let's find a coach with a low buyout. Like, they're not a poverty program. It's not going to be a money thing deciding it because somebody costs less or, wants too much. It's Alabama's going to, they're going to get their guy, and they're going to get their guy because they'll either pay a premium because that's what it might take at this point. But it's not going to be like, we got Chris Kleiman because his buyout's $2.5 million, and that was just too good a deal to pass up.
Yeah.
They'll get Chris Kleiman if they really want Chris Kleiman, but I don't think it's going to be, a selling point for a coach or a main point.
Ryan brings up Bill O'Brien. Interesting name, right? Bill O'Brien was there. We got interesting messages when Bill O'Brien was there.
What's he doing now? He's the coordinator for the Patriots?
Coordinator. Yeah, coordinator. So look, I mean, times change. It's been a good long time now since Bill O'Brien was Penn State's head football coach. And it had been communicated to me that Bill O'Brien just likes being a football coach. There's a lot that goes into being a college coordinator with respect to recruiting and all that sort of stuff. But Bill O'Brien seems, to my ear, to be cut more from the cloth of an NFL coach. Whether or not that happens for him again, given what went down at Houston, that remains to be seen. I'm not an NFL guy.
Right.
But I'd be very surprised if, given some of these other names out there, Alabama opts for Bill O'Brien. I think they'd have to go pretty far down on that list before they get to him. Certainly an accomplished guy. I mean, anybody with familiarity of the Saban run program, anybody who's a branch off that Saban tree, I get why they're in this conversation. I don't think he is going to be at top that list.
Right. If you're somebody who, he's in the NFL now. He spent a lot of time in the NFL. He had the year with Alabama as was it 1 year, 2 years with Bryce Young? It was 2 years with Bryce Young, and had the opportunity to get back to the NFL with what college football demands of major college football coaches now, with the 365-day recruiting, with recruiting your own team, with the movement of staff, with the need to constantly build up things behind the scenes, with the glad handing, with boosters. Like, could be wrong. Doesn't strike me as the guy who is just chomping at the bit to do that once again, or to do that on a level he's never been asked to do. All due respect to Penn State in the early 2010s.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's fair. But Ryan, I appreciate the question. I mean, I think that's fair. And, LK here, I think, kind of sums it up. There is a bit of a disconnect right now between college and pro. And if we start having that conversation about, well, why would a guy like, I was having a conversation earlier with someone, why would Harbaugh, who's not like a spring chicken, why would he want to go to the NFL? Why would he want to leave a good situation and go to this point sort of illustrates it, right? I mean, college with the recruiting, with the NIL demands, whether you've been a college coach for a while, whether you've been in the NFL and you're looking at college jobs, they are two different animals completely. College now is a different animal than it was 3 years ago, 5 years ago, right?
Man, being a college fan is a different animal than it was 5 years ago, let alone
we got to relearn
coach.
all these conferences. I got to stop saying Power 5. I mean, there's a lot that
I'm not
is changing.
even saying as a podcaster. I'm just saying as a fan, like if you have somebody out of town, somebody's in town from like Stuttgart or something, and you have to explain what the hell you do on Saturday, you need to block off a good 90 minutes to explain what you're doing, why you're doing it, and what the appeal is of the sport. And I don't know how many people have like random October Stuttgart visitors, but I don't know, that popped into my head.
Yeah, and I agree with the point.
Yeah.
I agree with the point. Here's one from Gregory, Dan.
Yeah.
He said, I don't know if it's been asked, but you see an NFL coach going to Bama. So he sort of addressed that.
With Brian Daboll? Yeah.
But he brings up Brian Daboll. He also mentions Mike Vrabel, who was surprisingly let go from the Tennessee Titans. I would expect that Mike Vrabel, again, not an NFL guy, but from what I've seen, sounds like he's going to be a pretty hot commodity in the NFL. Mike
Has a
Vrabel
good reputation,
Yeah, a very good reputation. Guys on his team were distraught when they learned that he was going to be dismissed. Wow. So, like, my hunch is that he won't be looking long for work in the NFL. He will catch on with somebody else.
Yeah, usually when guys get a taste of the NFL, they're like, I can only coach football and not have to worry about a bunch of bullshit. That's it? I get some time off in the spring? Great. Done. Great.
Yeah. So I understand why you'd bring up Vrabel. Vrabel's names come up, in passing for some like Ohio State rumors.
Sure, of course.
In the past, of course he would. But I would be surprised on that front. He also mentions Urban Meyer.
No to Urban.
I think it's a hard pass on Urban at this point. But
it's a Ray tie from here moving forward into perpetuity. It's a hard pass on Urban Meyer for the sport.
Okay. So unless we've got any other parting shots, this is where I think we bid fondue.
I think so. I'm trying to think if there's any. I'm trying to think about dominoes here, right? So you mentioned, I think there was a really good point that we're just entering into a new phase of the coaching carousel and the portal, because anytime a head coach leaves, the portal reopens for 85 dudes plus walk-ons and recruits, and signees and early enrollees. So it's early to mid-January. Things are about to get spicy. I'm about to go out of town, but I will be able to record. So I'm good. I'm good on that.
Take the USB mic.
Yeah, I've got the USB mic ready to roll in California. Right. But yeah, no, it was going to happen eventually. It never struck me as like Nick Saban's going to take this job to the grave. Like it seems like as he's warmed up over the years, or at least publicly warmed up and showed more interest in publicly talking about things he's into, like he might just, I think the Eagles are on their final tour right now. No Glenn Fry, RIP, but isn't that his band, the Eagles?
Sure.
Right. Maybe he just came across an ad to see the Eagles at some sort of amphitheater, and it coincided with some like recruiting banquet, and he said to himself, you know what? Fuck it. I want to go see what's left of the Eagles before I go.
Glenn Schumann. Yeah. Glenn Schumann will get a job before long. He's a good coach. I think Bama wants somebody who's a little bit more accomplished.
Yep.
Bama right now it's like the Death Star before they fired the first beam.
Yeah.
It's ready. It's all there. You need somebody who can come in, hit go, plug and play, and can win. Glenn Schumann could be that guy. Maybe you want to go out and get another Dan Lanning. I don't think that's for Bama. Jimbo would be fun. Jimbo would be funny. It won't happen, but I appreciate Thomas sending that comment in. Why don't we close out with this one?
Yeah.
Christopher's listened to the show for a long time. I thought of this in the shower. And
Ryan
I don't
Day?
mean that to be weird.
No, you think about Ryan Day in the shower. It's on the record. Continue.
I thought about Ryan Day in the shower. I did. And, we had our conversation with Bruce Feldman, the Athletic, a couple weeks ago. And one of the questions we brought up was about the pressure that is on Ryan Day. And there was at least some early speculation that maybe he could be in the running for the A&M job. That didn't Obviously, that didn't pan out, but if things keep going the way they have gone for Ohio State, I think Ryan Day is a good coach. He just might not be like Urban Meyer caliber national championship winning coach.
Well, no, I think he can win
State.
a national championship. Urban Meyer's won 3.
Urban Meyer is I mean, love him or hate him,
yeah.
he's a coaching legend. And Ryan Day probably is not that. Definitely is not that. Certainly has enough talent, recruits at a high level. I mean, he's gonna keep that program chock full of talent for the foreseeable future. But there does come a point in time where I think Ryan Day gets other opportunities if he wants them, because he is still a really good coach. He's proven he can get the talent, but not beating Michigan's really hard to stomach. I'm sure not just for him, but as we know, also the fan base. That is an interesting, what do we know? But just kind of an interesting musing in the early part of this coaching search.
Yeah, I think there's a reason why his name hasn't come up. Just because his stock right now is not where it was 3 years ago. And if we were having this conversation 3 years ago, I think it would be a much more real conversation around Ryan Day. But again, he's not somebody who has any connection to the South, let alone the SEC, let alone a major program within the SEC. He's another member of like the Chip Kelly mafia up there in New Hampshire. So that's why his name at the height of his stock was more like, oh, would like the Lions take a look at Ryan Day or whoever, the Browns. And I just also, I don't think Alabama's going to take somebody who's not sort of ascending or on top of their own little fiefdom right now.
No, and he's got an insane buyout as well. Like not that buyout is so much a concern in this coaching search for Alabama. I think they'll pay whatever the price to get their guy, but just an interesting musing.
Yeah.
Why don't we leave it at that?
Fair enough.
Appreciate everybody stopping by. We will, of course, be doing our best to stay on top of this one, as I said earlier, as part of the podcast. Going to drop the podcast to the feed pretty shortly after we get done here. So appreciate everybody subscribing, not just there, but also here on the YouTube channel. To the folks who are just stopping by for the first time and have subscribed to be part of the chat, we will obviously need to remain quite active here in the college football off season. It looks as if the months of January and February are sort of booked up on the coaching rumor and transfer portal front. So a lot more to come. Thank you again for sticking with us here this evening. Hope everyone stays solid.
Peace once again.